My videos on tuning your e-bike thus far have been based on acceleration, making it quicker. I haven't got to top speed yet. We're gonna use this one to figure out how to make these e-bikes have a faster top speed. But this video is purely on braking. Not so much your brakes themselves. This is more how to come off throttle, how to brake, how to keep this thing from getting into head shake. A common theme you hear when you build an e-bike, people on the forums will say get you a good steering damper. And it seems like more of an e-bike issue than a gas bike issue. I never hear it on these forums. And why is that? Now I've got a steering damper. See if you can figure out what's going on there. I am not a fan of steering dampers. I think they look cool. So I've got one on here for bling purposes only. I'm a professional helicopter pilot. Helicopters come with all sorts of automation to make the aircraft less sensitive, to make it easier to fly. I like to turn all that stuff off. I don't like prophylactics. I like all natural. I want my motorcycles to have all natural feel. I want my helicopter to have all natural feel. I'm not saying they don't work. They definitely work. There's enough play in a steering damper, just in the way they mount, that they don't really prevent that pre-death wobble shake. They let you get into that squirrely zone and then they save you, like this guy here, where the bike becomes a little bit sketchy, a little bit hard to control, a little bit scary, and then as he goes into his tank slapper, the damper saves him. Now he's running a very expensive damper. That's a real one. This is not. There's a fine point between a tank slapper or death wobble and a steady bike. So the bike gets a little squirrely, it starts coming unhinged, feeling like you're losing control right before that tank slapper happens. That's the area we're going to try to improve. The reason these e-bikes want to get into that head shake or death wobble so bad is the same reason a race bike does. They're running slipper clutches. An e-bike, whether it be a hub motor or a chain drive motor, has no engine compression. When you come off the throttle, it reacts just like a slipper clutch does. We can use regenerative braking to solve our problems. First, we have to figure out what gives us that speed wobble. Why do we get into tank slappers? Why do these things happen? There's a constant balance between everything from an airplane to a boat on maneuverability versus stability. You can't have them both. A race bike's going to err more to the maneuverability side, a cruiser to the stability side, but they both suffer the same thing. You can change the stability or the maneuverability of the bike with your suspension and how it's loaded and where you move that CG to. Trail and rake are important to understand. So the forks come down at a certain angle. That's my rake. We can't change the rake. It's what our bike is. Now you can change rake obviously by lowering these forks or raising the forks and the clamps and things like that. We're not going to get into that. We can also change damping and suspension controls. We can change preload. We can do a lot of things to control the rake and consequently the trail, but really not going to get into that either. A lot of your forks aren't really adjustable like these Mad Dogs. We're going to say you're given the forks you're given the rake you're given, and we're not going to change it. We're just going to worry about this trail measurement down here. When you compress your forks, you steepen the rake, because the fork is shorter now. The front of the bike drops down and gets lower to the ground, and the trail decreases. When you have a steeper rake or a shorter trail, the bike becomes less stable and more maneuverable. Inversely, when you come on the throttle and you raise these forks, the bike becomes more stable and less maneuverable. The trail increases. Most of the YouTube videos you watch of guys getting into tank slappers are following landing a wheelie. They go from a situation where the bike is very stable, extended front forks, and it could be a wheelie with just a millimeter off the ground. You may not even know you're doing it. The forks are fully extended. When you come off the throttle, the bike lunges forward, the forks compress, and now you have a super unstable platform with a steep rake and little trail. It also extends your rear end to a position it's in right there, hanging off the stand. When that rear shock extends, the wheelbase shortens, the trail shortens, and the rake steepens. And if you're not on your game, that front end is going to come undone. Slap the handlebars out of your hands, or the dreaded death wobble. It's pretty common. So let's go back to your OSHA training and the fire triangle. 3 things to make a fire: fuel, heat, and O2. We got to find something we can control in there to stop the fire from happening. Now we're at the gas station. We can't control the fuel. We're not going to remove the fuel from the pumps and everything else in the car. We're not going to remove the O2. It's in the air around us. We can't control that. But we can control the heat. We can put our cigarette out. That's going to prevent a fire. So think of your head shake and your death wobble as the same thing. Let's break it down into what we can control and what we can't control. Now obviously we can control all this stuff, but let's say we're given a certain rake, we're given a certain head angle, we're given a certain trail, certain frame geometry, certain rear end height, or how the bike is, and that's how we're going to leave it. Anything that raises that swing arm so the shock is more compressed, sucks the back tire up into the fender, is going to make the bike more stable. It's going to increase the wheelbase. The measurement from your front tire to your back tire increases as this swing arm travels up. Anything that raises your front front forks will give you a slacker head angle, bigger trail, and will increase your wheelbase, make you stable. Anything that decreases the length of the front forks, or anything that increases the length of the back shock, just like it is now, it's at the fully extended position, will make the bike more unstable. It's going to decrease your wheelbase. Something like a bump in the road, a pothole, or even like a G-out. You're going down a hill and quick up another one. So there's many things that can cause it, but we can't control the road. We can't control the frame geometry. We're going to say for the purposes of this exercise, we can't control the suspension. And then we're going to also say we can't control the loading. We've built our bike, we've stuck our big battery up there, we've got too much weight in the front. All these are problems with a e-bike. Those will be out of our control. We got a bike with a bad center of gravity. If we try to make a bike with longer front suspension, a slacker head angle, more trail, a lower rear end, we're going to end up with a chopper. You'll end up with something like this, and the truth is that will get into head shake also. That'll still give you the high-speed wobbles. It'll just happen at a higher speed. Our brain and our monkey skills would learn that bike. We learn these bikes quick, and no matter how good the geometry is, when we change that geometry, our brain and our monkey skills are not going to know it. It's our input that's going to put us into a death wobble. Now, a lot of these little bikes we use, like the e-grom, the Mad Dogs, and things to make our electric bikes, they're only designed to go 30, 40, 50 miles an hour. They're not designed for the speeds we're doing with these electric motors. So the bike wasn't manufactured wrong. It was actually manufactured very maneuverable, very unstable, but the trade-off is not lethargic and cumbersome at slow speeds, which these are normally driving. MotoGP guys doing over 200 miles an hour, yet they have very unstable bikes, very maneuverable. It's a trade-off. But yeah, those guys have head shake too. They get into tank slappers all the time. Now, some things we can control, but we may not want to, we may not be able to afford to, or we may not know how to. And that's your suspension setup and your tire. One of the best things I've found to stop head shake is a real tire. Pirelli Diablo, that's the real deal. That's probably one of your best cures to stop the death wobble. Soft compound, grippy race tire in front. I don't care what the back tire is. It can be this stupid golf cart tire. But that front tire on these little scooters, that's a Michelin City Grip. I'm not going to mess around with a cheap tire in front. A Bridgestone Battle Axe, a Dunlop Sport Max. Put a good tire in front. That's going to solve a lot of your problems. But for this exercise, we're going to say that's out of our control. Getting more preload in here so the fork doesn't dive as much. If you can prevent fork dive, you'll prevent a lot of your handling problems. You'll prevent a lot of those tank slappers. But again, for this exercise, we're going to say that's out of our control. We really can only control one thing, and that's rider input. Probably the biggest reason you get into tank slappers and death wobbles is rider input, believe it or not. If you look at advanced riders on motorcycles, they can do most things hands off. They can jump and land hands off. They can corner hands off. A lot of them train this to show them that their input is what's killing them. Uneven input on the bars when you're accelerating, uneven input on the bars when you're braking. This is a big factor in your death wobble. A really good rider knows his grip on those bars is what's causing that bike to shimmy. So he'll let go of it. That's a big balls move right there. You would be shocked how much this wheel moves back and forth like this. When you're accelerating, your hands just can't pull this evenly on acceleration. That's almost impossible. So now your wheel's moving like this as you accelerate. The chances of you chopping that throttle at the same time that wheel is dead on straight, that's minuscule. You're going to most likely chop that throttle when that wheel's here or here, and that's what gets the shake going. It's important to keep your weight on those pegs, keep your feet planted, keep your ass a little bit light, and get off those bars when it starts getting squirrely. And that's what we're talking about, that little zone of squirreliness before the tank slapper. That's when the bike feels sketchy, it feels unhinged, it feels wrong, and that's the scary part. One of the big things we can do in rider input to get the right amount of trail to make your bike handle how you want it, you're going to have to lower the rear end of this bike, and you lower that with trail braking. That's not to stop you, that's to bring that swing arm up, to compress that rear shock. That's to add wheelbase and add trail and lessen your head angle. That's all that brake is for, and that's why I've been playing my MotoGP game long enough to realize that these rear brakes don't do anything. A race bike doesn't stop with the rear brake because his back wheel is usually up in the air when he's stopping. He uses this to control his bike's geometry. The rear brake is solely to complement the front brake, to level the bike. Even if you look at this British performance course on avoiding high-speed wobbles, when you come off the throttle from a high-speed run, that front end is going to dive on you. To control that dive, you lead coming off that throttle by trail braking. So you add rear brakes, you sit in the upright position, and then you come off your throttle. You're dragging that rear end, you're squatting it, because when you put the rear brake on, the swing arm goes up, the shock compresses. That keeps your front end trail longer, it keeps your rake slacker, and it prevents a high-speed wobble. Now the beauty of the gas engine bike is that when you come off the throttle, you get engine compression. And the pressure from the engine compression actually slows your rear wheel down. The same time you come off the throttle, brings that swing arm up. It stabilizes the bike, but we're not riding gas engine bikes. We basically have a slipper clutch. We have no engine braking, so to keep our bike stable, we want to add rear brake when we come off that throttle. The beauty of the electric motor is we can do regenerative braking, and that's what it's for. Regenerative braking is to bring that swing arm up, compress that rear end, and make our bike stable when we come off that throttle. That's what this video is about. This button right here is Regen braking. That's not what's going to help us with our off-throttle head shake. This might as well be a rear brake. So when I press the button, it's just putting on the brake at whatever amps we assign. I guess if you're really coordinated, you could use that, but you might as well just use your rear brake at that point. Squeeze the lever whenever you stop. That brake is hooked up by activating this yellow and green wire right here. This is your low brake black wire and a yellow wire with the green stripe. The yellow wire with the green stripe is about 5 volts, I would assume. I haven't read that anywhere, but I'm guessing. And it runs it up through this switch. When you press the switch, it connects that wire to this black wire. It grounds it out. Now you can hook that to a switch, or you can also hook it to your micro switches right there. You see those? The wire would come in here, the green wire. The micro switch would connect the circuit, and it would send it back out the black wire, ground it out, and it would put your brake on. This is important. I will lose my brake light. I'm gonna have to unplug that. Do not co-locate this brake wire with your low brake switch. This brake wire has 12 volts DC going through it, and when you pull it in, it sends 12 volts DC out to your brake light. If you co-locate these two wires, you're going to send 12 volts DC into this ground wire, touching your hot and your ground, and it's going to spark and melt and do everything else. You're also going to send 12 volts DC down this 5 volt wire. Who knows what that will do? I don't want to find out. Don't co-locate those two wires. So to use one of these micro switches to activate your electronic brake as well as your brake light, you use what's called the high brake. Now the high brake is this single gray wire. Works just like this brake, except this single gray wire takes a 12 volt input signal. You have to know which side to tap it in. When you look at one of your brake switches, you have two wires going into it. One wire has 12 volt constant. The other wire becomes 12 volt when you pull the brake in, and that's the one you would hook to, one that becomes 12 volt when you activate the brake. It would send 12 volts in, and it would turn the brake on. The low brake and high brake can actually work at the same time, and they seem like on and off switches, but we all know from the throttle and other things that's not the way Far Driver does it. There is a little bit of a ramp up going on in here. My theory is it's the elusive PC13, the most debated setting in Far Driver history. We're going to find out. Once you've got your button hooked up, you have to turn it on and adjust it. That button is stop back current. The default is 2 amps, and none of this other stuff applies. Max back current is your off throttle. That's when you come off the throttle and it adds its own brake. That's all done via the controller. We're not going to hook any wires up for that. The button only deals with stop back current. All these percents and RPMs, they work off of max back current. So how much current do we put in here? The book says 50% of the current in max back we put in stop back. That's just a safety thing. They just don't want you putting the brakes on so hard you slide your back wheel and lose control. The current that we can put in stop back and in max back is going to be determined by what the manufacturer says this battery can take. We can find that out by going to the BMS. The BMS wasn't set up by the manufacturer. If you go to parameters and then current parameters, it's going to be this first one, over current protect. My charge over current protect is set at 32 amps. I can set this to 40 amps. That's what the manufacturer said. I specifically asked them how many amps I can put in for regen. They told me 40. I'm just gonna leave it at 32 though, that's close enough. We'll just call that 30. So that would be my max back current is 30 amps. Now, 50% of that would be 15 amps. So I would start with 15. Now I already know, because I've been using this button, I like 20 amps. And that's okay, that's more than 50%. The 50% thing I think is purely a safety thing. It has no idea what your battery capacity is. I'm 64 amps, so I can set that in there. Now to get our button to work, we go to follow. Disable, we have no braking. If you watch the current meter, if I give it gas, it adds current. No gas, zero current. If I hit regen braking, You see nothing. Now let's go back and change that setting. Follow. Now I'm going to go electronic brake system, wind brake valid. Try it again. Throttle, I hit the button, and yeah, look at that. There's the negative current happening. On the brake, off the brake. EABS wind brake, number 2 for follow, if you want to use a button brake. Wind brake valid, when we're sending electrical signal to that green wire on low throttle, that yellow and green wire. So if we're using our button brake, whatever amps I assign is what it's going to go to. You can watch the page there. Let the brake on. It goes right to 20, 24 amps right in there. And I've assigned it 20. I said these percents didn't have anything to do with the low brake, but they will disable the low brake. So let's say 500. That goes 0. So I've put 0 at 500 and below. You can see the brake switch light comes on, but I'll no longer have brake below 500. Since I didn't assign any percents under the RPMs, anything below 500 RPM will not brake. If I go above 500 RPM, let's say I go to 600 here. I hit the brake, I can feel the brake come on. You see the back current? And it keeps coming down. There's 500 RPM, the brake just kicked off. It'll coast the rest of the way down, and the electric brake comes off. So the RPMs do affect low brake. They're not affecting how many amps it brakes with. That's all done with the stop back current. It goes right to 20 amps. But it is turning the amps off at the RPM that has 0 on it. And if the RPM has a percentage assigned to it, it'll allow the stop back current to happen. And it pretty much feels like an on-off switch. Got it in PC13 race response. If we turned it to normal response, I wonder how that would change it. And this is just the low end brake, the button brake. It seemed to go right to 20, 24. It seemed to be about the same to me. I still may not have cracked the code on that PC13 mystery setting. And then EABS when release throttle, that's our off throttle. That's the one that's built into the computer that does it automatically, no wiring required. We have to set that up. That's the one that's going to help us not get into the death wobble. You can't have both. So right now we're on the button, and the button's only controlled by our 20 amps. You could use that, but we're going to add it into the throttle. We're going to make it automatic. Why not use it to make our bikes perform better? Enough horsing around. Let's set this off throttle brake up. It's going to take a lot of adjusting, but I'm going to do an initial setup. I'm going to leave it at 128 for throttle DEC steps. Max back current, we said we would use 30. Okay, free throttle. I think that's a 1 or 0 setting, just from reading the book, and I can't figure it out. I think it actually holds a steady speed at mid throttle. I'm not going to mess with it just now. I'm going to leave that alone. Brake voltage 0.01 volt. I needed to come on higher than that. That's not what I thought it was, because I can't even adjust that. The book says not to go over 50% of your max back current. That's just a safety thing. Keep your back wheel from sliding. You can go up to 80 amps on max back current if your battery can take it. I know I like 20 amps just from playing with the button. 20 amps would be 66% of 30 amps. So I'm gonna put 66% in these. And I'm just gonna run a straight 66% all the way up. This can all be adjusted later to your preference. Yeah, this is not a fine-tuning video at all. This is a how-to. I could even make it less up here so it's not as abrupt, maybe. I don't know. With 50% there, 50% there. Now I can go in here and turn it on and off with this one here. So I'm going to turn it on when EABS release throttle. Put regenerative braking on as soon as I let the throttle off, even at slow speeds. There's 14 amp of regen. That's a lot at this speed. It really slows it down quick. That's pretty annoying. You can't even like coast. You got to hold it right at the right throttle. If you try to coast, well, I could see this being dangerous. Let's say I'm going to turn a corner here, gravel in this corner or dirt, and I let off the throttle. Yeah, it would just slide me down. So this is not a good setting. I probably don't want this automatic braking to happen until I'm something above cornering speeds. Maybe even like 80 miles an hour. Something above where I'm going to be coasting or driving on dirt roads. It's pretty darn annoying. For just cruising around, I don't really like it that much. Maybe I've got it set too high. The amp's too high. That could be part of the problem. You can play with this forever. So I'll make everything below 500 RPM free throttle. And now the brake shouldn't come on till 625 RPM, about 600-ish. I'm just coasting because I'm sitting here at 300 RPM, and that's nice. And if I get going faster than 600 RPM, now the brake comes on.
And when it gets below 500, it just free coasts again. That's pretty cool. Some speed going. Brakes definitely on. I'm getting a negative 20 amps, 22 amps, and there's the free coast. And that's what I set it to come on at, is 20 amps. Gets down to 500 RPM. It's like you release the brakes. It just starts coasting. That's a pretty cool feature. And I'm going to do a couple of takeoffs, some fast 0 to 60 runs. And I'm going to chop the throttle. I want to test to see if this is making my bike handle better by decreasing my fork dive. See if it's preventing me from getting that steep rake, short trail, and everything else. So I've got the regenerative braking off right now. And I'm going to do some more 60 runs. That thing gets out of hand quick. Now I'm going to chop the throttle and hit brakes. The first run and the second run were with no regenerative braking. I went 60 miles an hour. I let the throttle off and just coasted to a stop. It went to that middle mark right there. The second run, chopped the throttle at 60 miles an hour, and I added brakes also. I went to that top line. I enabled regenerative braking off the throttle, and same thing, 60 miles an hour quick, chopped the throttle. The front end dive only went to there, that lowest line. So it really did solve the front end dive. And what was interesting was on the next run with regenerative braking, I chopped the throttle at 60 and added brake, mechanical brakes. And I only went to the center for my fork dive. So it definitely worked. I think I'll probably keep that throttle coming on at a pretty fast speed. It's even kind of annoying at 60. Around that 80 mile an hour mark where it really starts to get wiggly, I think it'll help. But it does help. I'm coming off at 60. I mean, it feels tight. It made it feel way better. Here's 60, 66, come off the throttle. Yeah, it doesn't even get loose. It doesn't even get squirrely. It's definitely working. I want to see, I just want this to help it be less sketchy when I'm coming off throttle, like engine braking. But I also want the advantages of having the slipper clutch in the corners at slower speeds. And it comes on pretty strong. I think I'm going to knock it down to about 40%. I think I'll start at above 1200 RPM. That brake is pretty strong. And that makes it a lot stabler. That really steadies the bike out. Well, now I can feel it getting squirrely below 60, of course. I put it above 1,000, and it's funny how quick it now feels squirrely right here off throttle. See, a little bit sketchy right there. Come off throttle. Yeah, a little bit sketchy. The bike sure is nice. I just never rode anything that rides this nice. So smooth. Now I come off that throttle at speed, man, that's nice. What a difference. Yeah, off that throttle, I see that car, you come off the throttle, you kind of panic stop, and it doesn't get on, man, it just stays planted, it doesn't come undone. Yeah, what a good mod. Yeah, that's stable. That helped the handling of this thing 100%. Yeah, wow. So, you know, 70, 80 miles an hour to have that brake come on, you should be below that around sketchy corners on something this little. But then again, if you had a bigger bike, it's not going to be as sketchy as speed, so you could put that speed even up around maybe 100, 120, something like that. It's a pretty neat system they got. It really does simulate engine braking pretty well. Definitely worth doing. That changed the bike completely.